Hey everyone, Dr. Richard Lai here with Study Acupuncture with me. Welcome back to my mobile office where I bring you some of acupuncture knowledge while I drive around very carefully, I promise. And I hope this podcast, now that it comes sort of from the car, I hope that it helps to motivate you because you know my story, and I have moved in with family, and so I've sort of lost office space where I can, do podcasts out of and whatnot, but I'm not letting that get in the way of showing up for you. So I'm not letting any excuse get in the way. So yes, driving around like this is kind of dangerous in a way, but I promise you I'm being very safe. My eyes are on the road, and I'm just having a conversation with you in the car and telling you all my thoughts about a certain topic. And I'm ignoring all the internal dialogue about, oh, you don't have an office space anymore, so you can't, do any more podcasts, and you don't have any time, and this, and that. So I hope this motivates you that no matter what circumstances, to just try, even if it's one small step towards your board prep, even if you feel like, oh, it's too late, your brain is telling you, oh, it's time to go to sleep, it's time to watch some Netflix. Do your best just to ignore that voice and try to do just one small thing towards preparing for your board exam. And I promise you won't regret it. You know that my favorite quote is, success is the sum of small efforts repeated day in and day out. So even if it's one small thing towards your board prep, that one little thing over time is going to lead to your success. So anyway, hope you're doing great. I hope this episode finds you well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whether you're listening to my voice while you're on your commute to work, whether you are in the grocery store, whether you are just doing some dishes. I welcome you again to my mobile office. So now let's buckle up and let's prepare to go over some acupuncture board prep material. So today's episode, we are going to talk about some of the basics, something very foundational, and it's something that shows up on the board exam a lot because it's part of the 8 principles. So today we are talking about deficiency versus excess. Now for some of you, I know this is probably very foundational stuff, it's very easy stuff, but you should never graduate from the basics as an acupuncturist. It's the basics that is your very foundation for your treatments. And it's really important to understand the 8 principles when you're treating patients. So this environment here anyway, for this podcast, for Study Acupuncture with me, we welcome everybody. Whether you have 1 day of experience or you have 30 plus years of experience, the goal is to not make anyone feel left out. So if you've been practicing acupuncture for 30 plus years, awesome. Share your knowledge. If you've been practicing acupuncture for a day, you just graduated, congratulations. Guess what? It's an amazing journey. Continue to share your knowledge with everyone around you. So now with deficiency and excess. Now what does deficiency mean? So deficiency means that something is missing. And excess basically just means that there's too much of something. That's the really, really boiled down version of that. Now let's break into each one of those. First, starting with deficiency. So deficiency, what does it mean? In TCM, deficiency just means that there's not enough of something. And that something is something that your body needs in order to function. That something could be qi, that something could be blood, that something could be yin, that something could be yang. So for example, if your patient is qi deficient, qi, we know, it's life force. It's what circulates through your body. There's so many different kinds of qi. And so your patient then, if they are qi deficient, they're going to lack what? They're going to lack life force. They're going to lack energy. So they're going to present very easily fatigued. They're going to present very weak, deconditioned. They're going to lack energy. They're going to fatigue easily. They will be qi deficient. So even with light movements, like they just stood up or they just took one step or a couple steps and they'll say, wow, I'm sweating. That's called spontaneous sweating. So with light movements, they may have spontaneous sweating. And that's because they're qi deficient. And our pores, where the sweat comes from, it's governed by our lung qi. So when there's qi deficiency, that means those pores aren't regulated appropriately. And what will happen? Well, what will happen is that there will be spontaneous sweating. Now, your patient could also be deficient in blood, and blood is what nourishes our body, it nourishes our organs, it gives moisture to our skin, it gives our face its luster. Blood is also the mother of qi. So your patient could present with a pale complexion then if they have blood deficiency. They might say that they're very dizzy. They might have very dry skin. And also, because the mind is housed in the blood, that patient could also present with a lot of mind-related symptoms as well. So that could range from depression to anxiety to even mania or something like that too, potentially. Now, another thing that could be deficient is yin. Yin can also be deficient. Yin is what? Yin is substance. Yin is a cooling thing in our body. And a very telltale sign, a textbook definition of yin deficiency, is when the patient presents with night sweating. And another telltale sign of yin deficiency is also dry mouth. You might see also dry throat or dry pharynx. And that's because yin is a substance. So when you're lacking substance, like yin, which fluid is inclusive of yin, then you're gonna have dry mouth, you're gonna have dry throat, you're gonna have dry pharynx. Another telltale sign of yin deficiency is when you see in the exam question, 5-palm heat. Now 5-palm heat, that's just where the palms are hot, the soles of the feet are hot, and also their chest is hot. So that's called 5-palm heat. And then lastly, your patient could present with yang deficiency too. Now what is yang? Yang is energy. Yang is warming. And so when your patient is deficient in yang, they're going to present with low energy. They're going to present with coldness too, because yang is warm. So they could have cold arms and legs. When you palpate their pulse would be forceless. It could be deep, it could be weak. And that's because if you think about, that pulse isn't strong enough to be bounding up and hitting your fingers. It's forceless, it's weak, it's deficient in yang. And so just to summarize all four of those things again, qi. When there's a qi deficiency, the patient's going to be lacking energy, they're going to be easily fatigued, they could also have spontaneous sweating. When there's blood deficiency, the patient could present with a pale face, pale tongue, dizziness, they could also present with dry skin, they could also present with like a depression because the mind is housed in the blood. When the patient is yin deficient, they would have the textbook definitions of yin deficiency, which are like night sweating, dry throat, dry mouth, and even 5-palm fever. And I don't think I mentioned red cheeks. Flushed cheeks or malar flush is another textbook definition of yin deficiency as well. And then lastly, we talked about yang deficiency. So that's where we have cold limbs because yang is warming. Yang is energy. So the patient will present with cold limbs. This is just all in general, by the way. So low energy, cold limbs, and then their pulse would be forceless or at least weak and deep. So basically the main idea with deficiency is just that they are presenting with not enough. They don't have enough of something. So what happens when you don't have enough? When you don't have enough gas, when you don't have enough food, you start to slow down. You start to dry out even if you don't have enough moisture, you don't have enough water, you don't have enough nutrition, you just start to fizzle out, you start to collapse. So that is deficiency in a nutshell. So your patient then is going to present very deficient. They will be tired, they will be cold, they'll have dry skin, they'll have dry throat, they could be very thin or emaciated, and their pulse obviously is also going to reflect a deficiency type pulse. Like it's not going to be very strong, it's not going to be bounding. So now let's flip it, let's talk about excess. So excess is when there's basically too much of something. Now that too much of something is going to be causing an issue because that too much is just getting in the way. It's disrupting things, it's blocking things, it's disrupting and impairing function in your body. And it's not like a quantity of too much, it's actually just like being too much, being there. Maybe it's qi that's moving, but it's moving in a way that's just being too much. So it's like qi stagnation. or it's blood that's stagnant. So it's like blood stasis. And that agitation, that stasis, is just too much for your body to handle. So for example, with qi stagnation, your patient is going to present with irritability. They're going to present with distension. They're going to present with pain because that qi stagnation, which is in excess, is just too much. So basically, excess conditions are where there's too much of something, and that too much is causing some sort of issue in your body. So for example, there could be excess heat. So with excess heat, your patient would have too much heat. So they would have heat signs. Like for example, their face would be red, like their entire face would be red. They could be very thirsty. That's a very heat type sign. They could also have constipation if the heat is drying up the fluids and it's causing dry stools. So that's going to cause your stool to be hard to pass. So that your patient could present with constipation. And then when you palpate their pulse would be rapid. When you look at their tongue would have a heat sign also, and that would be like a red tongue. Your patient could also present with excess cold. So with cold, the type of pain that they have, everything would present with cold characteristics. So their pain would be severe. Their pulse would be tight. Their tongue coat would be white. It wouldn't be yellow because it's cold. They would be contracted, like everything would congeal and contract because of the cold. Another excess is actually dampness. Now dampness is what? Dampness we know is dirtiness, it's stickiness, it's heaviness. So with dampness is an excess, it's a too much of something in the body, it's a fluid accumulation. So the patient is going to present with fullness, they're going to present with heaviness, they're going to say, I feel heavy, I feel tired, they're going to have a sticky tongue coat. They could also have discharges too. Phlegm is another one that's an excess. Phlegm could be like things that you see, palpable nodules, palpable lipomas. It could be phlegm in the lungs, and so the patient would present with coughing. They could have dizziness because that phlegm is misting the mind and they have brain fog. So again, this is, although phlegm seems to be lighter, it's still something that's an accumulation. It's like an excess that's built up, that's impairing, that's obstructing, that is just too much that it's becoming an issue to the body. Qi stagnation is another one. We talked about that before. Qi stagnation is where the patient has qi, right, and it's stagnating, and so it's causing issues in the body. So that's like abdominal distension, that's like irritability, that's like with a pulse, it's a wiry pulse. And then they could also be sighing a lot as well. Next we have blood stasis. So blood stasis or blood stagnation, this is where the patient's going to have pain that's very characteristic of blood stasis, which is like a fixed, sharp pain. The patient's tongue could present with purple tongue, like a purple, dark tongue. They could also have a dark complexion as well because of the blood stasis. So basically, with excess, those are the things that can be excess in the body. Excess, again, in a nutshell, is where something is agitating the system, the body system. Whether it's a stasis, a stagnation, it's dampness, it's phlegm, it's excess heat, it's excess cold. Something is stuck, something is obstructing, something is agitating, something is overflowing, it's accumulating. Something that is excess is just something that's agitating your system. So let's give a case example. Let's say you have a patient that has a red tongue body, they have a yellow tongue coat, and they have a very strong pulse, like it's bounding, it's wiry in a way, so it feels like a guitar string. So you have to ask yourself the question, is this patient a deficiency type patient, or is this patient an excess type patient? So this patient wouldn't be a deficiency type patient, right? Because they have the redness, they have the yellow. These are very heat type signs. There's also liver signs there too with the wiriness, but it could also just be that they have pain. And the moral is, when you go to any patient, you got to think about the patient in front of you and ask yourself, is the person in front of me missing something, or is something overwhelming the patient's body? So let's say, for example, you have a 45-year-old woman, and this 45-year-old woman is coming into your clinic and they are complaining of fatigue, they have pale lips, they have heart palpitations, They're like, oh, I can't remember my keys anymore. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast. It's like, I just have bad memory. You palpate their pulse is very thin. And when you look at their tongue, it's a pale tongue, and they have a thin white tongue coat. So what do you think it is? And again, you ask yourself, is the patient in front of me missing something? Or are they presenting with something that's agitating their system? Now with this patient, there's no mention of any heat signs. There's no cold, right? There's no phlegm, there's no dampness. The patient is weak and they have low energy. There's paleness in their tongue, right? So the feeling that you get then is that this patient is really missing something. And they're missing probably blood. They're lacking blood, so they're deficient in blood. So this is a blood deficiency presentation. And if you caught on about the poor memory and you caught on about the palpitations, you're probably thinking the heart is involved. So then you would put 2 and 2 together and say heart blood deficiency. All right, so now let's do another case. Now again, remember, think about it before you answer and just ask yourself, is this patient missing something? Or is something in them that's overwhelming them? So let's say a man now comes in, he's 48 years old, he has a red face, he has, his body is hot to the touch, like fever, febrile, he has a dry mouth, he is constipated, he has a rapid pulse. So what do you think it is? Do you think this patient is missing something, or is this patient in excess? Is something sort of overwhelming their system? So to me, this one screams excess because this patient has the red face, they have the fever. So this is most likely a heat type condition because of the rapid pulse as well. Maybe like a Yang-Ming channel type issue because of the constipation, like the Yang-Ming meaning the large intestine. So maybe there's heat in the large intestine, maybe something like that. Right. So the point is though that is this patient having an excess issue where something's overwhelming their system, or are they missing something? And the answer is something is overwhelming their system. So these 2 examples, they're basically exactly what you would see in your clinic. So if you're treating patients today, before you dive into the treatment, just ask yourself, is this patient missing something, or are they just in excess? Is something overwhelming them? And with that, it'll help you suss out exactly what's going on with them. And it'll make your treatment a lot more accurate. And over time, when you're doing this over and over and over again, it'll become second nature to you. You'll notice deficiency patients, they're just the ones that look tired. They look depleted. They usually talk with a softer voice. They're usually cold. They're usually wearing a lot of layers. They're usually thinner. They're usually more fragile type people. Excess patients are pretty much the exact opposite. These are your patients that are very symptomatic. They're in pain. They're loud. They're red. Their body basically is just overwhelmed with something. Something's agitating their system. So that could be excess heat, that could be excess cold, could be dampness, could be phlegm, could be blood stasis, could be chi stagnation. It could be a lot of different things. Now, another thing with deficiency and excess, that's a very easy place for us to do some differential diagnosis, would be the tongue. Now, with the tongue, when you look at a deficiency tongue, the deficiency tongue is going to present like it's missing things. It's going to be pale. It's going to be thin. There could be either no tongue coat or just like a very thin tongue coat. Like for example, when you see a tongue that is no tongue coat, that is usually a textbook definition of a yin deficiency type tongue coat. Then in an excess tongue, this is a tongue that's more like a red tongue. This is a tongue that's more like thick coat that's yellow. It could be greasy too, like a greasy tongue coat or a sticky tongue coat. That could mean that there's dampness or phlegm there. The pulse is also another very good place to do some differential diagnosis. So a deficiency pulse, what will they present as? A deficiency pulse, they will present with a very weak pulse. They will present with a thin pulse if it's blood deficiency, or a fine pulse. they will present with a deep pulse, a very forceless type pulse, because there's just not enough energy to bring the pulse up. And then we also have excess type pulses. So excess type pulses are more like full pulses. They're forceful pulses. It could also be a slippery pulse if it's like a dampness or a phlegm, or it could be a wiry pulse, depending on the type of excess condition. So when you're taking the board exam, when you're evaluating your patient, again, just make sure you ask yourself, is this patient trying to fight something off, like something is agitating their system, or are they deficient in something? Are they just running on empty? And answering that question to the best of your ability will more often than not lead you down the right path towards the correct diagnosis. All right, everyone, so that's it for today's episode. I hope that this episode helped clear deficiency versus excess for you. And if it did, and you got this nice high from actually understanding the material, why don't you share that high with someone else? You could share this episode with a friend. You could share this episode on Instagram or social media or anything like that. That would really just help out the channel, and I would really love that. Now, I'll share a little hack with you also, is when you listen to these episodes and you got a clear understanding from it, make sure that you come back and revisit the episode, or at least revisit the topic, because that's called spaced repetition. And spaced repetition, when you're studying, is actually a secret weapon that not a lot of people do. They memorize things, they read through things, they understand it to their best of their ability, but they don't come back and solidify the material and create plasticity in their brain. Because when you come back, you cement the knowledge into your brain by creating the connection again. So that way you're not searching for things and grasping for things when you are actually in the exam room or taking the board exam, because you know the material more solidly. So the secret weapon is spaced repetition. Come back to this episode a few days later, listen to it again. I promise you will not regret it. All right, everyone. So again, this is Dr. Richard Lai with Study Acupuncture with me. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. Don't forget that I am rooting for you. So let's keep studying smart. Let's keep showing up, and let's crush that board exam together. All right, everyone. Until next time, God bless and happy studying.